Hello guys, my name is Amish and today I'll be giving a feedback on my friend called Raquel, and she basically wrote an essay, a problem solution essay, and I'll be basically giving some feedback, and I'll be specifying some things which she can improve, and I'll also point out her weaknesses and strengths. So let's begin. So guys, I wanted you to look at a template of a double question essay. So first of all, we have the introduction and the first sentence. There should be usually, I mean, it's not like a hard and fast rule, but you should have two sentences in your introduction. One, the first sentence. In the first sentence, you should just paraphrase the question statement. So paraphrasing basically means to write the same thing in your own words, like using different words. So paraphrase the question statement that they've given. In the second sentence, state your answer to both of the questions. So basically, if there are two questions, then you need to basically answer them, uh, and then your introduction will be over, and then you move on to the first body paragraph. In the first sentence of the first body paragraph, you write the topic sentence. In the second sentence, you develop that idea, which means you explain more, and you basically develop that point and basically give more information about it in order to like show your understanding to the examiner. So you explain the point and then you give an example and then you say therefore XYZ. Okay, in the second body paragraph, again it's the same as the first body paragraph. You include a different topic sentence, you develop that idea, you explain it using adverbs. So furthermore, moreover, this, for instance, for example, then you give an example, and then in the conclusion you basically you you should start your conclusion with to conclude or in conclusion, like, and then you should put a comma because there's a pause in between. So to conclude or in conclusion is the starter of a concluding paragraph. And then in the second sentence you should just summarize both questions and answers. So you should basically rewrite. It's basically rewriting the introduction in different words. So you say in conclusion and then you summarize both the questions, the double questions, and their answers. And if you're suggesting solutions, like if there's a problem and you have to suggest solution in one of the question, you start the sentence of that concluding paragraph with in the meantime, and then you put a comma. So you could say in the meantime governments should XXX. Okay, government should do this, government should do that, so like that. So a friend of mine called Raquel, she has written this essay. It's basically a double question essay, and now I'll be analyzing her essay. Okay, so the question statement is car ownership has increased so rapidly over the past 30 years that many cities in the world are now one big traffic jam. How true do you think the statement is? What measures can governments take to discourage people from using their cars? Okay, so it's basically asking for our opinion as well, because it's saying, how true do you think the statement is? Okay, so what we basically do now is, so she has first written the introduction and then first body, second body, third body paragraph, and then the conclusion. Okay, so she has written the number of car, and the things that are in red are the things that are mistakes, basically the mistakes that she has made. And the things in blue, the words that which are highlighted in blue are basically my answers. So I have edited some of her answers, and the blue ones are mine, and the red ones are her mistakes. So let's begin. The numbers of cars on the streets have increased fast over the years, especially in the last 3 decades. So I'm not reading the blue part yet. I'm reading the black and the red part because that's her answer. Okay, especially in the last 3 decades, some urban areas became a bum-to-bum nightmare, and it does not matter the day or time. Some attitudes need be taken by governments to not only control but also reduce their traffic jam. So I've only read the red and the black part. Now I'll edit it. So instead of saying have increased fast, you should say so quickly over the last 3 decades. You, because fast is not a like it's not a wrong word to use, but it's not a good word. Like instead of saying, uh, because in the question statement it says so rapidly, so rapidly. So say so quickly. Don't say fast. The number of cars on the streets has increased. Okay, this shouldn't be have. This should be have. Okay, H A VE. This should be have, because you're saying the numbers. The numbers, it's a plural form, so you have to say have, not has. The numbers of cars on the streets have increased so quickly over the last 3 decades. You said over the years, but you shouldn't say over the years. You should say over the last 3 decades, because you should mention the year. I know that you have mentioned the last 3 decades in the next sentence, but you should mention it in the first sentence. Has increased so quickly over the last 3 decades. And then you have said specially. Instead of saying specially, say especially, because specially is a different word. It's not, it shouldn't be used. It's not appropriate to use it in this context. The word, I know that you have made an attempt. uh the word that you meant was especially, so be careful with this spelling, okay? Especially in the last 3 decades, and then you put a comma because there's a pause. Some urban areas instead of saying the red part, so some urban areas became a bump to bump. Instead of saying that, you should say uh well, okay, so I have written like my feedback on this in the next slide, so I'll go through that. But you shouldn't say the red part, so you should not say some urban areas became a bump to bump nightmare, and it does not matter the day or time, because it's a little informal and irrelevant. So you should be formal. And you said some attitudes need to be taken by government. Precautions is a better word to use. Don't say attitudes, say precautions. And you said need be taken by governments. Don't say need be taken, say need to be taken by governments, okay? And one of the weak points of this introduction is that you haven't clearly stated your opinion, and you haven't suggested the solutions clearly. You need to answer both questions clearly. So you have to state in the introduction how true do you think the statement is, and what measures can government take to discourage people from using the car. You should answer these two questions clearly in the introduction. Okay. Now let's move on to the first body paragraph. So you said, first, I believe if there would be more and better public transport, people could use less the car. So the red part, this is an incorrect sentence. You said people could use less the car, like it's an incorrect sentence. Then you said the commute could be reduced. I like the fact that you have used a word commute, and you have like written it as short sentence. The commute could be reduced, so it's a good thing. You should include a variety of long and short sentences. Then you said people would gain time and more, they could use better transportation this time. Okay, you shouldn't say the people would gain, you should say people would save time. And you should, instead of saying more, you should say moreover, they could use better, they could better use this time. So remove use. You don't need use. You could say they could better use this time instead of saying this word. I think you meant transportation, but this is the wrong word to use here. And then put a full stop and write for example. You should give examples, and you should mention the example. So you should say, for example, this, or for instance and for example almost mean the same thing. So for instance, comma, this. Okay. So then you should say, for example, and then you should that they have been spending inside the car, reading, talking on the phone, planning their lives among a vast and variety. Among a vast another activity. Okay, I'll change this. I'll rewrite this sentence in the next slide. I'll tell you how I wrote it. Then you said besides. Okay, this is a good word to use. Besides, you put a comma. It's a good word. Besides, government could stimulate the use of cleaner and most environmental care practices like biking or skating. Instead of saying cleaner, you should say cleaners. You should use the plural form, because we won't be needing one cleaner, we'll be needing lots of cleaners. Then you said in short distances, people might leave the car at home and go to work using bikes. Say short, in short distances, not shorts. In short distances, and put a comma after distances, because you're giving it a pause. And be careful with the commas, because you need to give pauses. Then you said it would still help the health of population, and people would practice exercise. Cars would release less gas in the atmosphere, and it would be a way to create more interaction with neighbors. Okay. Now the wrong thing with this is that you should write for instance, and then you should give the example, because you need to show the examiner that you know that you have to give examples. So say for example, put a comma, or say for instance put a comma, and then for instance then you say it would help the health of don't include still, we don't need still. Okay, it would help the health of population and people would practice exercise. Put a full stop and start a new sentence. Don't like write too long sentences with commas because it becomes boring for the examiner. Put a full stop and then write furthermore or moreover or in addition or besides. Put a comma and then begin and continue your sentence. Furthermore, you could have said furthermore, comma, cars would release less gas in the atmosphere and it would be a way to create more interaction with neighbors. Okay, this spelling of neighbors is correct. Neighbors. It's correct, but it's American English. You should use, I mean, probably they won't mark you wrong, but you should try to use British English. So, for example, colors, it should be Colours, not Coloors, because you shouldn't use American English. Okay, use the British English. And then in the this paragraph, you said, moreover, the community joined by public services could create groups of people who live in the same area and work in the same location to share rides. Uh, then you just put a full stop and you said reducing the numbers of cars on the ways. Then you said one more option would be to create days without car when the person should use a different way of transportation but not the car. Okay, the problem with this is that you should put a comma instead of full stop as you're continuing the sentence after a pause. So when you said who live in the same area and work in the same location to share ideas, you put a comma and then you said reducing the numbers of cars on the ways. You continue the sentence by putting a comma after rides. Then you said one more option would be to create days without car when the person should use a different way of transportation, but and then you said but the car, but not the car. I have written this. Okay, you should say but not the car. Then your conclusion is having considered the statement, I'm keen on strongly assuming it is true. However, there are a diversity of options to regulate and adapt the problem. Okay, the thing with this is that you said I'm keen on strongly assuming, this is a good word to use, and then you said it is true. You said that it is true. I've used that. And then instead of putting comma, you can put a semicolon, because whenever you have to write however, you can always put a semicolon before however, and then you can write however, and then you can put a comma, and then you can continue your sentence. I'm just saying that use a semicolon because it shows that you know a variety of punctuation. So try to include colons and semicolons only if you know you can use them correctly and appropriately. So after saying that it is true, you can put a semicolon, and then you can say however, and then put a comma after however, and then say there are a variety of options for regular and adaptive problem. Another problem is that you have to summarize the solutions and write them in the conclusion. So basically you have to answer these questions again in the conclusion that you have mentioned in the introduction. So conclusion is basically paraphrasing the introduction. So writing introduction in a different way, you should summarize the points and we should briefly write them again in the conclusion, but you haven't written them, so I'll now tell you how to write them. Okay, so this is my essay, and I've written it like in a very similar way that you have written. I haven't written it. I mean, the only thing that I did was, Raquel, that the essay that you have written, I've just edited a bit and added and removed some things, because there are like 1,000 ways to write a good essay to the same question, but I've written your essay, but I've edited and removed and added some stuff. So the introduction is, the numbers of cars on the streets have increased. Sorry for this, it should be have increased. uh, the numbers of cars on the streets have increased so quickly over the last 3 decades. Full stop. Especially in the last 3 decades, many towns in the world are suffering from unbearable traffic congestion. Some precautions need to be taken by governments to not only control but also reduce traffic jam. So it's a very similar one that you have written, but I've said traffic congestion and I've added unbearable because you need to include adjectives, adverbs, different types of words. So I've used this unbearable traffic congestion. Uh, and one more improvement that you could make is basically, instead of saying especially in the last 3 decades, because you already mentioned last 3 decades in the last sentence, So instead of saying last 3 decades, you could say last 30 years. So you could say last 30 years. Okay. So you could say last 30 years instead of saying last 3 decades because you already stated it in the first sentence. I've already stated it in the first sentence. Then first body paragraph. Firstly, I believe if there would be more and more public transport, people would use cars less frequently. The commute could be reduced. People would save time, and moreover, they could use better use. They could better use this time. Okay, don't include this word use. They could better use this time. For example, they would not waste the time that they have been spending inside the car and could utilize this time in reading, talking on the phone, planning their lives, and among a vast another activity. Okay, don't write activity because you should write the plural form. Right? Say activities. Okay, the plural form activities. Oops, I'm sorry for this, but oh my god. I hope it's not too bad, but activities because you should use the plural form. I forgot to write it in the first place, but you should say you could utilize this time in reading, talking on the phone, planning the lives, and among a vast and other activities. Done good, and this is a good word that you use, Raquel. And okay, so you're done. This second body paragraph, you said besides government could stimulate the use of cleaners and most environmental care practices like biking or skating in short distances. Okay, don't put a comma here. In short distances, comma, people might leave the car at home and go to work using bikes. An eco-friendly environment has numerous benefits. For instance is the same as for example. You should always say for instance, for example, furthermore, moreover, similarly, good adjectives, punctuation marks, I mean semicolons, colons, you should always use this. For instance, it would help the health of population, people would practice exercise. Furthermore, cars would release less gas in the atmosphere and it would be a way to create more interaction between neighbors. Okay, next paragraph. Moreover, the community joined by public services could create groups of people who live in the same area and work in the same location to share rides, comma, comma, reducing the numbers of cars on the ways. One more option would be to create days without cars, because you should refer to plural form. One more option would be to create days without cars when the person should use a different way of transportation but not the car. Okay, now I have totally changed your conclusion because I think that there's you have so much room for writing a much better conclusion. So this is my conclusion. So you could say in conclusion, I strongly opine. Opine is a good word. It means that it's your opinion. I strongly opine that the fact that the usage of cars is rising rapidly is creating a lot of traffic jam around the world. In the meantime, the official authorities is basically another word or another phrase for governments. Because you should try and use different words. In the meantime, the official authorities could introduce more efficient public transport systems and could initiate environmental friendly activities like biking. In addition, the governments could make groups of individuals of the same locality who would share their vehicles. Okay, so things to note that I've started my conclusion with in conclusion, then I put a comma, strongly opine, and then I just rewrote the question statement that the usage of cars is creating a lot of traffic jam around the world. You just restate it, and then you answer both of the questions that I've given in the double question essay. So you just say in the meantime because it's asking for your opinion, and then it's I've already given my opinion in the conclusion, and then you say uh, then you say, in the meantime, the official authorities could introduce more efficient transport. You just summarize in different words. So, introduce more efficient public transport system and could initiate environmental friendly activities like biking. Then you use, in addition, the governments could make group of individuals of the same locality who would share the vehicle. So this is like my essay, and Raquel, you've made a good try. uh, your ideas are really good. Your structure is really good. Your sentence starters and sentence lengths are very good. I think the only thing that you need to work on is a little bit on your grammar, like where to use commas, where to use semicolons, where to use full stops, when to stop a sentence and start a new one, and a little bit more about the plural and singular forms. You should be clear on that. Okay, and that's the only thing, and then I think you'll be able to get. So the total number of band in an essay is 6. So you will be able to get like 4.5 or 5 if you just improve your grammar a little bit. And for the essay that you have written, I think I would give you around around 3.5 out of 6. 3.5 to 4, but I think 3.5 to 4, yeah, would be a good band. So Raquel, I don't think that I've very well written that introduction, so I've rewritten it again. So the numbers of cars on the streets have increased so quickly over the last 3 decades, especially in the past 30 years. Oops, though not years. In the past 30 years, many towns in the world are suffering from unbearable traffic congestion. Some precautions need to be taken by governments to not only control but also reduce traffic jam. Have and then you have said you give your opinion. You basically you don't usually give your opinion, but because it's a double question essay and it's asking for your opinion, saying how true is this statement according to you. So you should answer any question. So any question given in the statement, there are two questions and you need to answer both questions. So you say, having considered this statement, this is your sentence, by the way. I firmly believe that it is true. Also, official authorities could take some measures to prevent citizens from using their cars, and these include spreading awareness on activities like biking, developing good public transport system, and encouraging people who live in the same area to share their vehicles. So you've answered both questions. You have stated both questions, and you have given their answers in the introduction, which you have also done in the conclusion. So you be careful with that. This is the introduction, okay? And these are the common mistakes to avoid in double question essays. So the first thing, not putting commas where appropriate, not using the correct tenses, not answering both questions fully, not outlining both answers in the introduction, mistaking it for one of the other essay types. So you should know how to put commas appropriately. You should use the correct tenses, so past, simple, I mean past, present, future. You should answer both questions fully in the conclusion and in the introduction. You should mention both questions, I'm repeating, fully in the introduction and conclusion. You should outline both answers in the introduction and conclusion. So you should answer both of the question in the introduction and in the conclusion, and you should not mistake it for another essay type. Anything that has two question marks is a double question essay. So again, these are like very similar things, but things to take care of, and read it over and over again to avoid mistakes in the future. Make sure that the same tenses are used consistently. So if you are writing it in present tense, don't change it to future afterwards unless it's necessary. Make sure you use words such as furthermore, moreover, likewise, in addition. I think Raquel, you're already using them. Make sure to take care of singular and plural forms, and make sure to put commas when necessary. Okay, so be careful with that. Okay guys, thanks for watching and best of luck for exam, Raquel. And keep sending messages and reports so I can give you feedback. And thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and click on the bell icon and share the video. And if anyone who is watching this video needs a feedback on the report or essay, uh, you could comment below and I could personally message you. Okay, so see you. Take care. Bye bye.